What we'd like to do first is do a round of introductions. So we thought we could do that if somebody walks in a little late. It wouldn't necessarily inhibit the conversation that we're going to have, and we'd really like to make this a conversational session today. I'll just quick introduce myself. My name is Renee Fennell, and I work with the Midwest and Southern Regional Office, specifically in alumni relations, and I work with a lot of alumni clubs and some colleagues in the room, Sarah Saperstein and Alex Quintero and Sarah Toussaint and Allie Goldstein. So if any of those names ring a bell, those are my colleagues that help make the alumni club activity work in the domestic area. I'd also like to thank you all for coming this morning. I know it's a bright and early Saturday morning. It's glorious outside, and we'll let you out pretty soon, so you can enjoy the day. And then I'd like to introduce one of our session speakers today, Rob Greenspoon. He is actually a patent attorney in Chicago at, this is good, Flaxbart and Greenspoon?
Will Flaxbart will be proud that you got it almost correct.
Oh, close. That was good. I was reading it. Okay.
Flashbeard has never really rung very well in his head.
Gotcha. Nuts. Rob is actually the chair of the Chicago Region's Chicago Society Committee, and he is also a co-chair for the alumni group, the affinity group for law in the Chicago area as well. Rob?
Thanks, Renee. So we, over the last few years, what I've observed is that the Alumni Relations Committee, or rather the Alumni Relations staff and the entire vibe of the volunteer effort has been trending more and more toward decentralization, to having the members and having the actual constituents in our tens or hundreds of thousands of people group have us actually drive the show a little bit. So I'm going to try to take that concept writ large and bring it into this room a little bit. And so we'll start with a round of introductions, as Renee said. And as you see on the board, name, degree, location, and volunteer activity. You heard those from me except for degree. I'm a patent attorney, and I got into that strange and wonderful field through the route of a strange and wonderful U of C degree called HIPS. Only with U of C people do I ever even bring it up. Mostly I say I majored in physics, but that was a history, philosophy, and social studies of science and medicine interdisciplinary degree. So that was my degree. And let's start on this side of the room, front row, and we'll work across the rows and zigzag back. This is an incredibly distinguished room, and I would gladly give up my seat here to have any of you sit, so I can sit in the audience and listen to the panel. But what I'd like to do, well, first off, when I told my wife that I was coming here and what the topic of the panel was going to be, she said, Rob, this will only take 1 minute. All you have to do is make sure that every event has alcohol, and then that's the only tip you need for a successful event. All
right, let's wait.
Yeah, well, I hear it's coming, but my perception of alumni activities and alumni events comes from my work for the Chicago Society and obviously the Alumni and Law Affinity Group. So what I do in my efforts for the university is I work very closely with alumni relations staff. And typically there's an interactive process of planning programs, and we figure out who the speakers are going to be in the near future, and we try to work out a venue. And of course then we try to make sure that it meshes and the calendar is right and so on. And I understand there may be different experiences for different areas. For example, reunion committees have a once-a-year experience. They work all year for it, but the events themselves are once a year. They're not rolling throughout the year like ours. As well as the local alumni clubs are built a little bit differently from the Chicago Society. So my experience is with working closely with alumni relations and basically party planning. But the party planning that we do is for 3 goals, and I'm going to write on the board if nobody minds.
I centered that. That took me a while.
But we all read it, so it served its purpose.
I haven't written on a board in such a long time.
Engagement. Recognition. And cultivation. So those are sort of the watchwords that we use when we're dealing with event planning, when we're trying to set up a calendar. What's interesting in my group, and let me just explain what the Chicago Society is. It's simultaneously a giving level, so it's folks at the university who give at the $2,500 level and higher every year. But also at that giving level, the university tries to provide extra benefits, extra engagement, and extra opportunities to network and bring people together, perhaps to meet each other and extend their friendships that they've formed at the university and later. So what's interesting about the Chicago Society to me is that at the events, there's never going to be an ask. There's never going to be the actual, I guess, cultivation side of it, or the cultivation side of it is going to be much more subtle. So the primary focus of what we do with the Chicago Society is that we try to really increase people's good feelings about the university and give them opportunities to network. So with that in mind, we get the opportunity to suggest to the Alumni Relations Office professors who might be interesting to speak for us, and then they come up with ideas and provide them to us, and then we form the calendar. So one of the observations I made when I first became a chair was that almost all of the events that we were having as the Chicago Society in Chicago were events that were taking place in the Loop area and occasionally in Hyde Park. And it occurred to the whole committee that maybe what we need to do is make a little bit of a change. So we formed a concept that we applied, and the concept was take the committee to the people, meaning take the regional committee of the Chicago Society out beyond the central Loop area and enable other folks to enjoy its benefits. So for example, there could be a population of retirees in a suburb who wouldn't ordinarily come downtown even for a 6 p.m. event, well, especially for a 6 p.m. event. So examples of take the committee to the people events that we've had, which were very successful, are Professor LaBarbera in the biology department. You might know him as the guy who wrote this fabulous Chicago Magazine, or University of Chicago Magazine article about the physics of monster movies. I won't get into any of the gory details, but he's a really creative professor, and he really is able to connect with people. We had him speak to us at the Chicago Botanic Garden about biology field observations he had been making around Botany Pond. That was an incredibly successful event that actually I give full credit to Linda Liu, who's unfortunately not here. She helped plan that. But that was an incredibly successful event because it was the intersection of so many things that were important to us. It was an interesting topic. It was in the suburbs. It was also a family event, so people could bring their kids. And the venue, this is my thing. I don't know how many people share this, but the venue of the event matched the speaker's topic. It wasn't a direct match. He wasn't speaking about anything that was specific about the Chicago Botanic Garden, but at the same time, we had a nice slide presentation and an hour-long talk where we learned all kinds of new things that we didn't know before, and then we walked out into nature, even if it's mediated nature. So that was to me, that was successful on all the dimensions. And I'm thinking back, because it was a family event, I think there was no alcohol. So it's the exception that proves the rule. Another successful event, and I've had some of the invitations recreated here in my experience, included Douglas Baird, who's the former dean of the law school. He's still a professor, a special name professor here at the law school. Douglas Baird actually supervised the renovation of this Eero Saarinen structure, which took several years. So in the process of his administrative service to the university in supervising the renovation of the building, he had come across some research, or he had come across the fact that Eero Saarinen himself in the 1950s recreated the master plan for the University of Chicago. So, or he gave his own adaptation of what the master sort of 20-year or 30-year growth plan should be. Now, here was a modernist architect who was acting on a palette or a canvas of Gothic, neo-Gothic, what do we call it now? Cobb Hall and neo-Gothic architecture. So he stepped out of his law discipline and ended up writing articles and giving talks, one of them to us, about Eero Saarinen and the master plan of the University of Chicago. Now, that was incredibly successful because we hosted that at the Rookery Building. And most of you probably know the Rookery Building is one of the masterpieces on LaSalle Street, one of the masterpieces of Chicago architecture. What's fascinating about the Rookery Building is that it was first it was Louis Sullivan. No, Holabird and Root. First it was Holabird and Root who built it in the 1890s. And then it was Frank Lloyd Wright, 20 years later, who did a major renovation of the Rookery Building. So you've got two great architects that layered on top of each other in the very same architectural mode. Well, that was where we were having an event where the speaker was going to talk about two great architects and two really wildly different architectural movements that ended up layered on top of each other. And so the connections there were really fascinating, and I think the audience really appreciated that. He gave a great talk. So these are the ingredients of a great event, to my mind, at least for the purposes of the Chicago Society, where we're not there to do anything other than be available as a recognition event, an engagement event, and allow people to make new friends, allow people to network. That is interesting speaker, a venue that's pertinent to the topic, and alcohol. So that pretty much takes care of the sort of my own war stories. I mean, I could go on and on, but this room is so full of great experiences from great events that I'm sure we can all share other great ideas. So just some final thoughts, and then I'd like to open this up for discussion and see what other wonderful ideas we can take forward into the future. One other, if I may, Adrian recalls this, the Judge Zagel event. For the affinity group, we had Judge Zagel talk to us about his career in law and writing. And I only mention that because I only want to be sure to mention this because that ended up selling out, if that's the right word. The registration closed and we ended up taking a waiting list. That's a testament to the power of an incredibly rare speaker, rare and interesting speaker. Judge Zagel is a federal judge. He doesn't speak very often. He's actually not allowed to speak about cases that are pending in front of him. And so the law community just jumped on the opportunity to come listen to him speak. We engineered his speaking topic very carefully because, of course, he, a few months later, was presiding over the Blagojevich trial. So there are certain things we knew that we shouldn't even suggest that he touch. So what's fascinating about Judge Zagel, in addition to him being just interesting and a federal judge, is he's acted in several movies under a pseudonym. He's written a fiction novel about a federal judge who pulls off a bank heist in the Federal Reserve in Chicago. So what we did to introduce him is juxtaposed just a very, very short snippet of his fiction writing with a very, very short snippet of sort of a scathing yet pithy minute order where he issued a ruling basically getting to the heart of a dispute that somebody brought into federal court about whether dogs should be allowed in a condominium. It's very funny. You can see a little bit of it in the materials here. So that was a springboard for him to launch into what he liked to talk about, which is writing, his history of writing, like how the University of Chicago contributed to his legal career and his fiction writing career. So what made that a great event, in addition to a lot of alcohol, because that was the lawyers at a downtown venue, was the fact that here was a rare and interesting speaker, and he was an incredible draw, and that worked out in a fantastic way. With that, let me open this up for questions and suggestions and feedback, and let's see what we can do to make the next events even better. In the back.
I had a question. We kind of in DC would love to take a lot of our events to kind of the next level, but because all the events are self-funded, I think sometimes we have a difficult time getting the venue and the alcohol unless it's university-sponsored event. And so I don't know if you have any suggestions on how to get, venues or get these kinds of things or resources we could use to kind of have more of these type of events. I just feel like when we've looked at prices, it just hasn't been really possible to do.
Well, right, and did everybody hear the question? Okay. And as you might imagine, the Chicago Society is a donor level situation, so there seems to be a budget for things like that, and they're cost sensitive, but there's always a budget for alcohol. The alumni and law group is perhaps more pertinent to the challenges you're facing, because we had no budget. In fact, we didn't even exist. We sort of invented ourselves before we were formally organized. And what worked for us is we had two law firms who co-sponsored. And the mechanics of it were the co-sponsorship allowed the law firms to be listed on the invitation, which is a really good marketing tool for the law firms, because you get listed on the invitation alongside the name of the federal judge who's about to appear and speak at an event. And the deep mechanics of that were, it was the one firm paid for the room at the Custom House, just a room rental fee, or the bartender fee rather, and then the other group paid $500 toward tickets, drink tickets. So the first people who showed up were able to get drink tickets, and believe me, there weren't many at Custom House prices. There were about 30 drink tickets that paid for. It's unbelievable. But that got the room going. Drink tickets ran out. Then it became what do you call a cash bar? Right. But that worked really well. A lot of frustrated people, like person number 31 must have been very unhappy. But that's a suggestion. I know that it's a challenge to come up with a budget for the alumni club events. So I'd throw that out to the rest of the audience to suggest ways of doing that.
You might see, some of you, if you were in the room early, and we have some extra copies up here. It'll also be, all the handouts that are on the table down here are included on the flash drive that you'll all receive. But there's an upcoming event in Seattle where the space was actually hosted by an alum, a Booth alum, at the Donnelly Gray group in Merrill Lynch. And so, unfortunately, because it's Merrill Lynch's space, we can only have sparkling sodas and such. But the group out there has been working with a couple different distinguished alums to do a distinguished speaker event. And so they've got a professor at UW that will be presenting, and then the space is actually free. So the money that they're charging, it's $10 a person, but that money's going to refreshment. So at least it's defrayed the cost of it, so it's more attainable for folks. And, I think it really all comes down to networking and trying to ask those questions, whether you ask them in the marketing materials, you ask them in the emails, you ask them at events. If somebody works at a law firm or, works at a place like Merrill Lynch, can you host for us? We're also trying to do more in people's homes, for that matter. But I just wanted to point out that there is some information, the postcard going around. But I just wanted to start the answer.
So just one anecdote on that. We organized a career month event last year in Dallas, Fort Worth. I looked into hotels for hosting the event. It was too expensive. The catering was too expensive. It wouldn't fit within my budget. So I rented out a room in the office tower where I work for $175. I still haven't reimbursed my employer for that, but that's okay. We don't need to tell them about that. Well, I got a guy at a pizza place near my house to be the co-sponsor of the event. So he was the official pizza sponsor for the event. And he gave me pizza at half price. And I also invited non-alums and charged them $10 and didn't charge the alums. So that sort of allowed me to generate a budget from a variety of sources to get the event off the ground. This is much more informal than things that were organized, believe me. But it was just something, it was a career event, so we were just trying to do something like that. So I tried to get creative in different ways to try and make things happen.
So I guess an idea that's come out is sponsorships.
Yeah, my sponsor, I had a pizza sponsor, that's right.
And
Amigos Pizza.
Mr. Director,
Springs in Dallas.
To build on Michael's point, the home events we found to be very effective. About 2 years ago, my fraternity built 2 Odyssey scholarships to the tune of about $160,000. And one of the things we had to do was to muscle some money out of a lot of the people. So what we did is, I call this my $12,000 lasagna story. We invited about 20 geeks over to the house. I made 2 lasagnas, a total cost of like $60. We had 3 bottles of wine, and we got $12,500 out of it. Those events really are fantastic because they really are very intimate, and people get a chance to network as opposed to some of the bigger events where you're listening to a speaker. Just a networking event with a couple of bottles of wine and some lasagna really does create a lot of good feelings, and they're very cheap.
And we didn't use alcohol either, right? At our event, the building that we were in wouldn't allow us to have alcohol in that building. Just the same, someone else mentioned a problem like that. So we only could serve soda, which is, it's not good for socializing, but, there's compromises we made. I would love to have served alcohol. But it's just creative ideas, just whatever works, right? Something informal.
2 tips on that. The event that Greg hosted for his fraternity, I wasn't even a part of, so the $12,000 was all him. But we then hosted a Chicago Society event and a med school alumni event. And they do work really, really well. The one thing, though, I would encourage you, if you are going to ask someone to host an event, do it a long time in advance. Because recently we've been asked to host events next month. It doesn't work that way. So I think asking people in your communities to host events, if they have the house or the living area to do it, is wonderful. And people seem to really appreciate it.
I'm going to put on my Alumni Club of Northeast Ohio hat really fast because Jonesboro, who is an ABG member, is our club president. She's in another session. But we wanted to share that one of the Alumni Club of Northeast Ohio's most successful events was an event where we utilized a venue that already did what we needed it to do. The club had an event at the City Club of Cleveland, which is a free speech forum that records programs, panel discussions for an audience over lunch, and then submits them for broadcast over NPR. And we wanted to have a distinguished alumni lecture, and we said, where can we have this? Let's have it at a place that is already set up for these kinds of discussions, that won't charge us AV, that has its own RSVP lunch bar catering mechanism. It was like $15 or $25 per person paid directly to the City Club, and they let us come in with our distinguished alumni speaker. They handled all the external advertising to the community, we handled all the alumni advertising, and there were no other costs associated. So I think in a place like DC where you have such amazing resources in terms of media or government meetings or corporate meetings, there may be a place that does what you want to do that may have some free time or a minimal rental fee that you might be able to get covered. That would be a low-cost establishment.
Yes.
I'm trying to put together a behind-the-scenes event and wondered whether it would be in the evening probably, and wondered whether that generally includes beverages and food.
I would suggest that at a certain window of time, like between 6 and 8 p.m., I think that the conventional wisdom is you need to have hors d'oeuvres and some kind of beverage, not necessarily even alcohol, but you've got to have sparkling water and sodas or something. But I think also if it's a Sunday afternoon and it's a 3 p.m. event, nobody will think twice if there's no refreshment, especially if you're near a refreshment area where people can get their own.
Well, that's another question, whether after like a visit somewhere, is it typical to retire to a restaurant or something?
Not as part of the official program, but that often happens. In fact, after the Law and Alumni event, that was in a room, a separate room at the Custom House, And I know I and my wife and several people, and then I saw other tables did the same thing, came from the event, and we all had dinner there. So the Custom House really loves us.
And I would actually just say that one thing that I've been hearing recently about maybe a behind-the-scenes event, or maybe going to a baseball game or something like that, one suggestion that it keeps coming up is you have to find some time for people to get together to chat afterwards, whether it's they go to have dinner by themselves, or everyone will move from the behind-the-scenes area to the restaurant 4 doors down. I think incorporating that into the overall idea of the event is very helpful, because Chicago folks want to talk. They want to talk about what they just saw or heard, and they want to ask some questions.
I was just going to say I work in alumni relations, so putting on my work hat is I'm doing events for alumni relations. One thing that I've been doing, because we work with really small budgets at regardless of what education is, it's a small school, is doing a 7 to 9 and doing dessert and coffee, which is always cheaper than wine or roast, but it's still, and often it gives the chance for the after. It's a more intentional sort of after than a before. So that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, you get more with food with the mix and than beyond the event, because people do want to socialize. We did an event at UC 2 years ago. We tied 2 together, and we went to the Baha'i Temple immediately, followed by a relevant restaurant. Okay. And so people had some opportunity there, and they could sign up one for the other, but most people took the whole package and went. So I would advise food
And I like that, what you just said, that you separated the 2, right? So you had
they followed from one to another. You didn't have to go to both.
Right.
But people did go to both.
Right, but you gave them the option. That's nice.
Let me take a quick poll. I'm sorry to interrupt. Let me take a quick poll. How many folks in the room have ever been or plan to be involved in organizing events? And how many want to organize events which include faculty speakers? Right, so many of us. And I'm wondering, from the Alumni Relations Office point of view, if you don't already have a contact, how do you begin that process? How do you get that ball rolling so that my group's event can have a faculty speaker which gives an interesting talk?
Well, so the process is slightly different, I think, for Chicago folks versus non-Chicago folks, because as we all know, the University of Chicago is slightly decentralized, and deans don't necessarily know when their faculty are traveling. So putting salt on their tails is a little bit difficult. But everyone here in this room probably has a staff contact that they can reach out to, and then we have some formal processes that we can go through to help you reach out to that particular professor. But at the same time, we also know that you all went to school here at some point, and you've built your own personal relationships with some of these faculty. So you might actually be emailing a particular faculty member more than we do. So if you might have that personal connection, you're more than welcome to reach out to them, as long as you just give us a heads up, so that we also know that we shouldn't maybe be asking that particular faculty member 8 other times to do 10 other things.
And there are some who are hands off to you, like you're not allowed to talk to them at all because they're too high level or something.
Yeah, and some will never do anything with us. Yeah, because they're too hot to handle right now. Right. Especially these days. There are a lot of professors that are engaged in different work outside of the university. They make it difficult to get on their schedules.
The MoTech Choir used to travel. I don't know if it still does travel, but it did a play off of that. As I said, I live in Hyde Park, so there's an advantage. But at holiday time, what I've done is I've asked for our condo holiday party to have the lab school. You went to the lab, I believe you said. I don't know. Have a lab school jazz group come and play, and they also have an a cappella group, and we have them come. And the serenade residents too. So there are a lot of ways of getting different parts of the university out. And you think, in terms of recruiting students, and maybe having a lab students or other college groups, whatever, go out and be seen, and that it isn't all sadness, as some of these T-shirts indicate. There are other activities, but it's a different way of getting people to use and relate to the university and understand it.
Let's close down the session today and just leave you with a couple final thoughts. Go out there, be instruments of the University of Chicago, bring the word out, get people together to network, to make friends, and to cultivate their own friendships again. Talk to alumni relations about speakers, and they will help you market. Thank you, everybody.